All right. The difference between real and fake positive thinking is actually very simple. You have to consider what we mean by positive. Positivity means, well, it can mean two different things. There's a real positivity and there's a fake positivity. Fake positivity is when you use your thinking to convince yourself that you're feeling good, or you convince yourself that everything is okay, or you convince yourself that things are better than they are. That's fake positivity. Fake positivity is when you ignore the problem and you just tell yourself that it's going to be okay. You just tell everybody else that everything is fine. That's fake positivity. Real positivity would be when you immediately start looking for the solution to the problem. Real positivity would be even in the face of an adversity, or even in the face of something not going right, or something not going the way that you thought it would, you are able to be rational and be composed, and to not lose your equanimity, and to remain stable and breathe and consider the whole problem and look at the solutions. Real positivity doesn't require a smile. Real positivity doesn't require oh, hey, John. Real positivity doesn't require any happy statements. Now, that doesn't mean that people who are using happy statements and smiling per se are necessarily fake. So don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. You really aren't able to tell what another person is doing simply based on did they smile or not. You're only able to tell based on the words they speak in terms of the context and the consequences of what they're saying and doing. So you can't simply say, well, this person is acting in a way that I perceive as negative, therefore they are negative. Or this person is acting in a way that looks positive, therefore they are positive. Again, it's not really for you to judge based on something like that, but you have to look at a person's actions and words over time, and you have to use common sense. You have to be honest with yourself, and ultimately you have to basically stop worrying about what other people are doing, firstly, because if you're totally focused on what other people are doing, whether they're positive or whether they're negative, you're not really focused on your own life. You're not really focused on solving any problems in your life. And so it's very easy for us to then go into a judgmental mode or attitude where we, look at other people and judge and compare. But that's an example of negative thinking. If you want to know what negative thinking is when you use your thinking process in order to compare yourself to other people and to judge them, so that you can make yourself feel better. But that's a really stupid way of using thinking. An even stupider way of using thinking is what I call fake positive thinking, where you convince yourself that everything is fine. For example, all the people in this world who convince themselves and try to convince other people that everything is fine in this world and it's all under control, and spirit and God and consciousness and all these things are just going to take care of the problem, and everything will be better when we get to some other dimension, or when we die and we go to heaven, or whatever the case, whatever you may believe. It's all just, it's kind of like a Mad Lib. Just insert the noun here. So those who are all saying, okay, well, everything is wonderful. We just have to let go of attachments. We have to let go of suffering. We have to just be grateful. You can't do that if you're in a situation where you're starving, or you're in a situation where you have an alcoholic father who's hitting you every day and you're like a 5-year-old. Or you have an emotionally abusive mother who tells you that you're shit every day, or who abandons you when you're young, or, a myriad of different things. I'm looking at what Marta is saying. Yeah, I agree with you to a certain degree, Marta, and I was making that point earlier, which you may have heard, that a lot of times we spend our time judging other people. Now, I will be very frank. I spend a lot of time calling out other people. But the thing is, I'm not judging. So, for example, if somebody's saying some bullshit that I can see is going to mislead other people, I will call you out. I'm not afraid of the consequence of that. Because at the end of the day, the worst thing that someone can do is to talk a bunch of shit and then expose what they're really thinking. So anytime a positive thinker I call them out and then they become negative, they get to face themselves. So I don't really have a problem calling people out. But the difference is whether one is doing it to make yourself feel better, or whether you're doing it because you're at a point where you can see the bullshit and you're aware of whether you're reacting or not. And hey, sometimes I make mistakes. Sometimes I do react, and I do it from a point of reaction. But I learn from that. So there's really not a big deal regardless. But I do agree with what Marta was saying in that we do spend a lot of time focusing on other people, which is just an excuse to not focus on ourselves and not grow. And Kevin Trudeau addresses that in level 5 in Jinn. And so, but the point I'm really looking at is, again, if you're feeling judged by the things that I say, that's something for you to look at. And I'm not saying that anyone in particular is. Again, that's not for me to say. I don't judge people based on what I think they're thinking or feeling. I only call things out based on the words that I see and the statements that I see and the actions that I see. Because that's what I do for myself. I don't hold myself to the standard of what I intend. I hold myself to the standard of what did I do and what did I say and what was the effect and the consequence that it had. And every day that I develop my own vocabulary, I become more and more self-aware, and I become more able to understand my own actions and my own thought processes and other people's as well. And so just the natural consequence of developing an effective vocabulary and a heightened self-awareness is that you naturally become more aware of yourself. You naturally understand yourself better, and you naturally then can understand other people better, because everybody's exactly the same. No one is unique. No one is different. We are all just clones of the same DNA. You know, like, really, you can trace every single person on the planet back to a certain genetic line, to a certain person. And it's not Adam and Eve. This is like well after Adam and Eve, if you believe in that sort of thing. You know, I got my DNA ancestry test back, and it shows you, it traces like your genetic line all the way back. And everybody on the planet today can be traced back to one dude who was like really, shall we say, prolific in his activities. So my point is, we're all just clones. There's no difference. You're not special. You're not unique. And yet, some people are born with aptitudes and abilities that are seemingly beyond what the average person has. But that has more to do with the fact that our education system is so suppressive and stifles creativity, stifles expression, stifles self-awareness ultimately, because it's hard to develop self-awareness in an environment where you're constantly feeling judged and you're constantly being criticized and you're constantly being punished and having to defend yourself and having to survive. So I don't judge anyone for not having a certain level of self-awareness, because I saw someone made a post the other day about stupidity and ignorance. All stupidity is just programmed. Stupidity is literally just a program. If you change the program, you will be smart. They've already done the research. It's going back to the 1920s that your IQ is directly related and directly predictable based on the level of your vocabulary. Bottom line. So the more vocabulary you have, the more you can express yourself, the more you can think effectively, and therefore the more self-awareness you'll have. And the thing is, you know, going back to the original point of the video, when it comes to real positive thinking versus fake positive thinking is done by low vocabulary people who have enough self-awareness that they see that there is a problem in their life. Yeah, exactly, Marta. The whole point here is not to blame anybody for being unself-aware. The point is to develop self-awareness. But why? Why develop self-awareness? Now, everyone can have their own reason. So here's my why. I will share my why. It doesn't have to be your why. I think it's a why that makes sense and should make sense to everybody. But that's kind of up to you, I suppose, depending on what you see. My why... hold on a second. There we go. Turn the light on. My why is because I want to be the very best that I can. I want to experience myself in the best way possible. I want to experience the world in the best way possible. So it's a very simple point. That you could say it's selfish, but how does it hurt anyone? It only benefits everyone if I'm the very best and the world is the very best that it can be. The why would I want other people to develop self-awareness is because that would improve the world that I'm in, and it would improve my experience of myself. And I can see the potential that we have in this world to do a lot of really amazing things. And really, if you really break it down, there's very few actual problems in this world. Most problems are derivative. Like, for example, those of you who follow, were aware of, during when it happened, the whole housing crisis, and was it like 2008, 2009, like when Obama got elected, there was this whole big thing because the banks were sending out or giving out all these loans that people couldn't afford and couldn't pay back. But the real problem was that then those loans were being chopped up and sold as derivatives on the derivatives market. So people were basically trading as commodities these loans, but that were all chopped up, and you couldn't even really trace back the piece of the loan that you were trading on, what actual loan it came from. I mean, it was a whole mess. So it was like problems compounded on problems. And then what happened was eventually when those loans stopped being paid back, the whole thing just started crashing because no one could even trace out where it started. So my point, though, is that it's the same thing with the problems in this world. Like, a lot of times as Americans, for those of you who are American, we take things for granted and we complain about things that are actually derivative problems. Like, we complain about the liberals in the school system and the progressives this and the Republicans, are too whatever. Like, everyone complains about each other. And the thing is, those are all derivative problems. They're all problems that exist only because we don't have brotherhood. We don't have harmony between people. We don't have harmony between cultures. I don't really have a problem with culture per se, because culture is just a sort of automated way of behaving and living. And there are certain automations that I think are required. Like, I don't want to have to think about what happens to my poop after I poop. I want it to just be taken care of. So there's certain things, like if you don't know where you're going to get your food tomorrow, I could just walk into a grocery store and pick up some food. It's automated where it comes from, the whole process of it being grown and everything. But we tend to then focus on problems that are derivative problems. So, for example, the fact that not everyone has enough food and education, they're very unhappy and they don't have solutions and they can't go get jobs and they can't develop businesses. So they start attacking everybody, or people feel disgruntled, or they see injustice and they don't have a solution to deal with it. So they start protesting and Black Lives Matter and all these things. And you have it on both sides, left and right. But what I'm saying is those are derivative problems. Those are not the root problems. We can't solve the problem of there's too many liberal professors in the university, or there's not enough Christian bakers who want to bake gay cakes. Like, those are not real problems. Those are derivative problems. Those are problems that are like refractions of something. So the real solution here is to solve the problems that actually exist, which are design flaws in our system that don't consider how the system actually functions, how physical reality actually functions, how our bodies actually function, what is required for each person in terms of education, in terms of food, shelter, water, healthcare, all the basic things that a lot of us take for granted as Americans, and that even a lot of us take for granted even though we didn't have those effectively. We just assume that we did because we don't know otherwise. So real positive thinking would be applying your thought process, your contemplation, your focus on solving those problems. Many people listening and many people considering this are not in a position to solve those problems. So as Marta was pointing out, really what you should focus on is solving the problems in your life primarily first. Why do you not have enough money to basically do whatever you want? Like, I'm going to meet my friend for coffee, and then afterwards I have a few appointments and I'm not really too concerned about it. Most people, though, have to get up, rush to work, work all day, get home, just relax. They don't want to talk to their spouse. They don't want to play. Like, when was the last time you just jumped in your bed when you got home with your spouse and just tickled them and like kissed them and jumped around and played and had fun and like chased them around the house? Why don't you do that every day? Isn't that what kids would do? Right? Like, every time I come home, my son, Max, is like super excited and then like wants me to like chase him and play with him and kiss him and tickle him and everything. Like, every time. That's what he likes. I like to do it too. But it's like as adult, yeah, Marta. But most people as adults, it's like we get into this routine where it's like, I just got to get up and make money. Just got to go home and relax. This is why sports is such a main focus for men, because they just want to fucking relax. And they don't want to hear their wife complain about a bunch of shit. They don't want to hear about anything other than just watch the sports dudes that they wish they could be like, making a bunch more money than they wish they could ever make. And they're like, man, I wish I could have a life like that. And I don't have any problem with sports. I played sports. I like sports. I don't watch sports anymore just because it's not interesting to me that much. I mean, I would if there was like a special game or like the World Cup or something, but I'm not like obsessed with it. And not to judge anyone that is, but my point is there's a reason why it exists. But the real reason why it exists is so you can be sold stuff. That's why, so Budweiser has a platform where they know 30 million people are going to be watching. That's why it exists. It only exists because it can make money. It doesn't exist to actually entertain you. It doesn't exist for whatever reason you think, or whatever benefit you think you're getting out of it. That's just the way to get you there so they can advertise to you. There's a lot of stuff like that in this world. The education system. Man, I was out walking the other day with Rocco and we saw a bus, a school bus, that had an advertisement on the side of it. And I forget what it was. It was like some children parent activity thing. And I'm like, they're freaking advertising on the side of a school bus. And actually I thought that was brilliant because the school bus drops the kids off every day and the parents see that every day. I'm like, wow, why isn't there more advertising? We should have more advertising on buses. We should have Game of Thrones advertisements on buses. We should have Budweiser advertisements on school buses. I mean, really, the parents are drinking as soon as they pick up the kids anyway, so they might as well get the most refreshing tasting beers, right? Should be advertised those, right?